Jack Hughes has been the executive director of the Gainesville Sports Commission since 1997. He recently served as the 2008-2009 chair of the National Association of Sports Commissions. Jack is a graduate of the University of South Florida with a BA in Natural Sciences. He has 40-plus years experience in organizing and marketing special events and managing nonprofits. This vocation began with his coordinating the first Earth Day activities at the University of South Florida in 1969. Jack headed the United States National Air Balloon Championships in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, served as the interim executive director of the Greater Baton Rouge State Fair, and was the director of the Louisiana chapter of the National Hemophilia Foundation. He coordinated over 30,000 miles of torch relays for 3 Olympic festivals and the World University Games. Jack is a JC's International Senator, a member of the Rotary Club of Gainesville, and the Fighting Gator Touchdown Club. He serves on the boards of the Gainesville Downtown Owners and Tenants Association, the Arts Association of Alachua County, and the Gainesville Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs Board. He is a strong local advocate for parks and recreation, co-chairing the effort that passed a 2-year local initiative to improve facilities and acquire environmentally sensitive lands, the Wild Spaces Public Places campaign. Jack currently teaches a sports event management course at the University of Florida. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be here.
So glad to finally have you. This has taken too long. Jack, why don't we just get started by give me an idea of how the Gainesville Sports Commission came to be?
Well, it was before my time, obviously, because we're just now in our 23rd year. In 1987, a group of people from Gainesville sat around a kitchen table with Jimmy Carnes, who was head of the Governor's Council on Sport and Physical Fitness at the time, and he drew out the outline of what ought to be a sport commission here in Gainesville, at a time when people were starting to recognize the value of sport as a part of the tourism model.
Right.
And while the early effort was primarily aimed at getting the high school football championships here, that has changed over the years to a more broad approach to the type of sports events we bring to town.
What is the mission of the organization?
Well, we're charged by the county, for whom we work under 2 contracts, with bringing sports events and helping other people bring sports events to our community. We've learned over the years that to do that we had to add to our mission, and that being to support recreation and to get more facilities built, because the more people we support in the areas of recreation, whether it be soccer, softball, baseball, tiddlywinks, or whatever, that's where our sport volunteers come from. And we've been involved with trying to get facilities here, because as great as those facilities are at the University of Florida and at Santa Fe College, we can't always get them when we need them. And so we've tried our best to help build facilities that in fact can host events.
I want to talk about a lot of those facilities, but you mentioned the relationship with Alachua County, and I have watched over the years. I was around when that first sort of came to fruition, and I've watched in amazement as that relationship has grown. So the Alachua County Visitors and Convention Bureau, for the folks who may not know this, is kind of the county's division that administers the bed tax that is collected from visitors, not collected from Alachua County residents, but visitors to our county. Jack, can you take us back to when that bed tax was first instituted and this organization first came into being, and how you began working?
Sure. Well, originally there was just a very little amount that went to the Gainesville Sports Commission, usually on a contract basis, usually after the fact. When Roland Lug took over as the director for Visit Gainesville, you sat in, I think, on some of those meetings where we kind of looked at what was causing people to come here, and sports was one of the top things. And Roland basically said, okay, well, if that's the case, we need to fund sports. He also said at the same time that he didn't want to do it. He didn't want his office to do it, that the Gainesville Sports Commission was there, and we were the most likely organization to do it. And so we began developing then, and that was almost 16 years ago, we began developing the kind of relationship that said, okay, Gainesville Sports Commission, you do what you do best. The Visit Gainesville Tourist Development Council will oversee the destination. We'll look at sports, and we'll look at meetings and conventions, ecotourism, and arts festivals. And that's where they've focused over the years. They've been our
duplicate.
No, and
efforts.
We didn't duplicate. And the great thing is that they become our destination manager. You know, they say this is the image we want. This is how we want to show ourselves to the rest of the world. Those people we're asking to come to Gainesville and Alachua County, and it's been a wonderful relationship. It's really worked well over the years. In fact, Roland and I have been singled out as a great example of how a convention bureau and a sports commission, when they exist together, ought to work together.
You were saying earlier that that's not always a symbiotic relationship.
And you know, originally I don't think it was with us either, but sometimes communities don't quite get what a convention bureau should be doing, nor do they understand what a sports commission is. And it takes different forms in different places, but we are, I think, a good model of how to work together. You know, it was kind of neat. Last summer, we hosted the world's largest synchronized swimming event. The same weekend, actually 2 weekends, the Jehovah's Witnesses were in town. We both used the Stephen C. O'Connell Center. And our respective staffs got together with the O'Connell Center, with the meeting planner for Jehovah's Witness, and we worked out all the details how those two huge events could work together. And that's just kind of our, I think, high point of just how you do that, how you make those things work. And what was great is our community has enough hotel rooms that we could do both. There were times where we couldn't. We'd have to do one or the other.
Right. Now, Jack, you've mentioned to me before that one of the big turning points in your relationship with the county was something that maybe had held you back a little bit, was not having enough funds to have a bid pool that made you competitive. When did that come about, and can you explain the details of that?
Well, about 2000, I think, when Roland's office had decided that, okay, this is how we're going to do it. I think that's about when we said, okay, a bid pool is necessary for those events that we want to bring to town. Sometimes you have to write a straight out check just to pay rights fees to get the event to town. But we more often than not negotiate, all right, instead of paying you $30,000, we'll provide certain things if you're a rights holder coming to town, and we can very often get, for much less than a $30,000 rights fee, get an event to town, do the things that needs to be done. And that bid pool, which is $110,000 a year, with the ability, if we don't use it all in 1 year, to roll over to another year, that allows us to do that for events that we do. And then if there's those groups like Gainesville Soccer Alliance or the Stampede that does basketball tournaments, or the city of Newberry or Alachua, any of those that are doing events, bringing people to town, we can ahead of time work out an arrangement on how we would either assist them, pay a rights fee, and it really has worked well, especially with a staff of 3 people.
You only have 3 people?
We have 3 people.
Is that right?
And we either host or help other people host 35 events or so a year on average.
Now, I know you also have an active board, and I know you work with a lot of volunteers as well.
We do. We have a very active board. Most of our volunteers are usually the sport-specific volunteers, which is great because those are the people that kind of make sure that what's going to happen within the field of play happens correctly.
Right.
Our small staff can, in fact, kind of get things set up and make sure that contracts are signed and we have all the insurance and everything else that's needed to run an event. But those volunteers are important. Many of those volunteers are, in fact, some of our members of our board. We have a 25-member for our board, all volunteers, and I've been doing nonprofits for years, as you can attest. We have such a great board because they don't worry about the day-to-day. They are looking at the big picture. What should we be doing now? Are we doing the right things now? And what can we be doing later? And
just what a board is supposed to do.
Yes, and they're interested in the finances. They're great because they're a great backstop behind us. They help us with our budgeting and all sorts of other things at the beginning of the year, so that as the year goes on, we can deal with the big things.
Now, Jack, very soon I want to get to the events, because I think there are a lot of events that people know about, but they don't necessarily put it together that these things happen because we have a sports commission. But you mentioned, advantages to local groups because of the things that you do. And I know there's the Gainesville Soccer Alliance, and there are ball fields out in Diamond Park, and there's the new ball fields coming in Newberry, and there's archery. And can you tell us some of the ways that you benefit the local sports community?
Sure. Well, one of the great, I don't know who said it, but I think one of the best lines is that before we had a bid pool and before we had facilities that we could host tournaments, our local parents were never the home team. They were the ones that were always having to drive out of town to participate in an event. They were never able to be the home team, have people come to town. And it saves them a lot of money by not traveling, and in many cases they're able to raise dollars by hosting tournaments, so that when they do travel, they have ways to cover their expenses.
Right.
It cuts back on the number of cake sales and car washes that people have to do to cover the expenses when people travel.
Right. Yeah, my stepdaughters each played 3 sports, and they played on club teams, and I used to shake my head and wonder about how much money we were leaving behind in these other communities. And you're right, it seemed like back then there were very little opportunities to do it locally. Speaking of those dollars, what is the impact of what the Sports Commission does in terms of the local economy? And I know that you have to factor in, not only the facilities and the hotel, but there's restaurants and there's entertainment, there's what people do here. Are you able to track those kinds of numbers?
We've actually had a number of studies done by the University of Florida that have validated estimates that we made based upon anecdotal information we get from our visitors, or hear how much our local parents were saving by not traveling. Mm-hmm. And depending on the year and how many events and the type of events, that may be as high as $20 million a year, probably closer to the average of about $16 million a year.
Is that right?
That it's direct spending. It has no multipliers. It's just what people come, leave in town. And we try our best also to, not only the overnight folks, we're also doing our best to track those that come in for the day. They also spend money. They just don't spend quite as much because they don't stay in hotels. Right. But we figure our job is to get the visitor here, give them a great experience so that they come back.
And again, I want to remind the taxpayers who are watching the program that this is a bed tax paid by visitors, and really what you do helps to just kind of feed a cycle, does it not, in terms of replenishing that money by bringing these folks in? The
bed tax that they spend in hotels, but they also, when those visitors come to town, they're relieving what you and I pay. I mean, because they're also adding to the tax collections from the general coffers.
Sales tax.
The sales tax. Yeah. They pay the sales tax. And I mean, there are communities that don't do what we do, right, where some of the burden that is we see get relieved doesn't get relieved. And even though people think we pay higher taxes, they're paying higher taxes than we are in those communities.
Right. Now, I'm trying to envision what an average day over at your office is like. You know, and I know you've got a ton of events that happen every year that you've kind of secured and created this strong relationship, and they happen every year. But are you always looking for new things? Are you pretty much settled into the things that you already do? Or?
Well, there is no average day in our office. I mean, it does vary. We also, it's wonderful, we have usually 3 to 5 full-time interns for the University of Florida. So keeping them busy sometimes is part of our challenge, but it also means that we've got extra arms and legs and eyes and ears to handle things that we need to get done.
And people who are being trained.
And they are being trained. Many of them are either in the hospitality industry or in sport management. But on any given day, we might be working on an event coming up in the next week, wrapping up an event that took place last week, considering bids for events that might take place in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, working on relationships with hotels, sponsors, members of our organization that help fund us, because as great as the funding from the county is, we have about $80,000 a year that we need to raise, plus another $80,000 in-kind contributions to offset budget. So about $160,000 that we need to make things work around our place.
And the in-kind contributions are services that are required for the events?
It might be legal services, donated website.
Yeah.
It might be donated hotel rooms by our hoteliers when we have visitors and have to pay for officials' rooms. Any number of things like that. It's all budget relief, all important to us.
Well, let's get into the good stuff here.
All right.
How many events do you hold? Let's talk 2010. How many events are you going to have this year?
I think there's probably about 30 that are on the books for this year that we either are hosting or helping other people host.
I just happen.
You happen to have a list, huh?
I do. I tried to memorize it, and then I realized how many there were. Tell me about the Tour de Falasco.
That's been a great relationship. They've been doing that for a number of years. It's an off-bike race where the people who keep the trails clear, the bicycle riders that keep those trails clear out in San Falasco, they've been hosting an event in either late December, early January for a number of years with 400 riders capped right there. They raise enough money to cover some of the stuff they're doing. And it's slowly but surely we've been developing that relationship, and I think by next year we're going to add another event we're going to work with them on. And those people they bring in are from Georgia, South Carolina, all over Florida.
And now, what exactly is the relationship there? Let's break down an event like this. What do they do? What do you do?
Ahead of time, they contact us and say, we're going to do an event, and it's going to generate, it'll bring this many people to town. Sometimes we'll ask them, are they from the state of Florida, out of state, whatever. And then they'll say, we need a little bit of money for portable toilets or security or any number of items like that. Can you help us out? And based upon the number of room nights it generates, we'll say, okay, if you generate a certain number of room nights, then we'll pay you up to this amount from the bid pool.
Sure, there's a formula. You can take that number of bed nights and figure it with the bed tax. One that's near and dear to my heart is the Jimmy Carnes indoor track meet that my daughter has participated in.
That's been pretty cool. We're planning right now, although we aren't planning yet, we will shortly, our 4th year of the Jimmy Carnes Indoor Track and Field Meet that started with 600 kids, 600 spectators, and last year we had 2,000 coaches, kids participate in a 2-day meet at the University of Florida in the O'Connell Center. Yeah. That's named after Jimmy Carnes, who, as I mentioned, was one of our founding people and also was the track coach at the University of Florida, and actually the year that he was inducted in the USA Track and Field Hall of Fame was the year we named the event after him.
Oh, is that right? The Archery Shooters Association of Florida.
We've been doing that one for, at least 16, 17 years. And the wonderful thing is that Gainesville Raceway has allowed us to use the woods that surround the raceway for years. Now that Newberry has the new Easton Newberry Archery Center, we moved the whole event out to Newberry last year. Had 1,500 archers. Wow. That shoot life-size animal targets out in the woods. And it's always been a 3-day event, but it was so well received. And there are facilities now that are special out in Newberry. We're going to a 5-day spring training for archers in the north. That usually brings in people from 40 states and Canada, Great Britain, Australia, who come in here.
So it's safe to say hotel managers like you, Jack. Is that a...
Hopefully most of them like us. Actually, you know, it's always not all of the hotel managers understand what we do. Most do. The fact that we have 17 hotels that consistently are members when they don't have to be, that I think tells you that they value what we do.
Tell me about the Independence Invitational Wheelchair Basketball.
That event, actually, we were going to do it again this year. We've worked with Doug Jones on that for a number of years. Hopefully hopefully he'll bring that back because it is a wheelchair basketball tournament.
I happened to, although I didn't break any records, I happened to run in the 5 Points of Life half marathon this year.
I remember.
You're involved in that, I know?
Yes. We've been working with Life South Blood Centers since that idea was first conceived, and it's gone from the 1-day event to now a weekend, and I think it takes a while, but slowly but surely it'll continue to build the number of people who come.
You know, you've got so many on here, but before I just sort of go chronologically, I want to make sure we have time to talk about the Sunshine State Games.
Yes, definitely.
And I know this show is being filmed for those at home on June 3rd. And tell us when that's coming up.
Well, we actually have just completed the first portion in late May of the Sunshine State Games basketball. And it's different than it was when it originally started. It's now the Alachua County Festival. It's Florida's Sunshine State Games, Alachua County Festival. Polk County's doing some events, and other parts of the state are doing other events. We had 81 teams for basketball just 2 weeks ago as we taped this. We now have roughly, as of today, I think there's close to 2,000 who have registered for another 11 events that'll be taking place on June 11, 12, and 13. Everything from archery all the way through ultimate and volleyball.
Is that right?
Yeah. And by the way, 300 ultimate Frisbee players are already registered as of today.
That's an exciting sport to watch.
It's fun.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it at the Jonesville Park. We're working with Gainesville Soccer Alliance to use the soccer fields, line them off for a number of ultimate fields, and that's a great way to use that wonderful facility.
You know, we're going to be graphically putting up all the events during the course of the show, but you know, you brought up something that interests me because I've also watched with a lot of admiration over the years how you have really lobbied for things that, even things that are not necessarily Gainesville Sports Commission related. Things like, you know, the soccer fields up in Newberry and the Archery Center and I know Cone Park is something
Yeah,
that
we're
you've
involved
lobbied
with
for.
that. Mhm.
And I think I mentioned in the introduction your involvement with wild spaces and public places. Can you tell us a little bit about the facilities that you've helped bring about and that particular initiative?
Well, that initiative, it did two things. One, the Gainesville Sports Commission supports the brand in Alachua County. We recognized a long time ago it's not just sports, that when people come to town, they may have their competition, but if there's a museum or a festival or a butterfly museum or the springs, they take advantage of it. So we've always supported that. And so the Wild Spaces Public Places campaign made a lot of sense because it took care of both.
Right.
It took care of existing facilities that direly needed improvement. It also helped build a couple, not as many as we want and not necessarily all the way we would want them built. But it has taken some of the pressure off. And so that's been an important piece of it. But it's not only the public initiatives where we use public dollars to build facilities that are owned by governmental agencies. We've also felt like we've been a catalyst, whether we're working with the city of Newberry or city of Alachua or whoever it might be, on getting public-private partnerships and talking about the vision as to, well, if we had it this way, here's what we could do. Right. And that's kind of what we've been doing. And again, I go back to my board. You know, my board talked about whether we would get involved and how we would get involved. And they permitted it all along because it always has helped us advance our mission.
Well, Jack, I get the feeling that we haven't heard the last from you on possible initiatives like Wild Spaces, Public Places.
Well, I mean, we definitely left a lot on the table.
Right.
We need more facilities. I mean, I have a personal vision. I would love to see one facility that had an indoor facility that could be a gymnasium or whatever, right. That could support both a swim and dive center and a track stadium, right, on the same piece of property. Something like that alone would add about 15 events a year that we'd be able to do. And now's not the time to really make a big push for that, but sure is the right time to start thinking, how could we do that? Where are the public-private partnerships? Where are the grant funds that would allow us to do it?
Well, Jack, I think we're going to end on that vision. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you again.
You too.
Dogs can't pick up after themselves.
Mommy!
So even in your own yard, scoop the poop, bag it, and trash it. Clean creeks, clean yards, clean feet. A message from the Gainesville Clean Water Partnership.